Dear friends, the month of July is a very, very significant and important month for a Jesuit. Not only for the Jesuits, but also for their associates, their collaborators, their institutions, their apostolates, their schools and colleges, social centers, their research centers, parishes, youth, everywhere, their associates, their collaborators, their staff, the Jesuits and students and even alumni all celebrate the feast of St. Ignatius of Loyola on 31st of July. That is why this month is so important. And when we look back at the life of St. Ignatius, who was known as Inigo in his childhood days, was a very, very ambitious, aristocratic boy. Ignatius was born in 1491 and he died in the year 1556. And in his life there was so much to learn for us. And Ignatius, when as a young boy he fought a war, and in that war he was wounded. And in that wounded time, his legs was broken. And while lying down there in his convalescent spirit, he started reading two books which turned out to be his spiritual transformation. He was a Christian, he was a soldier, and he had this tremendous ambition, but all those ambitions have to be completely turned towards God now. And Ignatius journeyed through a spiritual life, and he contributed his spiritual experiences for all of us. And today, undoubtedly, Ignatian spirituality is one of the most influential spiritualities in the world. It is very, very progressive. It is very, very humane. And Ignatian spirituality, which contributed last 500 years almost to the world, has, in my opinion, 10 major areas to look into, to reflect upon. During this Ignatian festival, when we celebrate this, prior to 31st of July, the Jesuits world over undergo a 9 days of novena. Novena means 9 days of special prayer. We take up Ignatian spiritual themes and we reflect upon. And the final days, that 3 days, perhaps some of the Jesuits take up as a 3 days of intense reflections on the Ignatian spirituality to see whether this spirituality has permeated deeply into their apostolate, into their own individual personal lives. Ignatian spirituality is a transforming spirituality. And once we are touched by the spirituality, we can identify which are the areas of Ignatian spirituality. I will explain to you briefly 10 areas of Ignatian spirituality. Number 1, Ignatius started as a soldier who was wounded, and he got 2 books to read. One is the Life of Saints, another one is the Holy Bible. And while reading the Life of Saints, a thought came to his mind saying, if Francis of Assisi, a trader boy who could become a prominent saint, or Saint Benedict, or Saint Dominic, all these earlier saints could become saints, why can't I be a saint? The only thing is, I have to transform my life. I have to take a complete turnaround. I have to look at God. And that's how Ignatian spirituality started. Based on his own convalescence period experience, he determined with resilience to follow Christ come what may. So that is the first point we must remember. A transformative experience and a transformative spirituality which came to him by his personal experience, personal reflection. The number two we must remember, the important point for us to remember is, this is in the words of the famous Jesuit poet, the world's one of the fantastic poets. His name is Gerald Manley Hopkins. He writes one line, that is, the world is charged with the grandeur of God. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. That actually is a central theme of Ignatian spirituality. Wherever you look at, you will find God full of energy. God's spirit is at work. That is what Ignatius experienced. As Ignatius put it, all things in the world are presented to us so that we can know God more easily and make a return of love more readily. So that tremendous experience of Ignatius turned out to be the crust of Ignatian spirituality. The third point is, it's about a call and a response. God calls all of us, each of us. We need to respond. And that is the tremendous experience Ignatius had about. He was philosophically, theologically, he was looking at life as a gift. God gives us this gift to praise and revere Him, to move towards God. Ultimately, the aim of life is to reach back to God, be part of God. So that is his third major area of spiritual development. And the fourth point, it's very, very interestingly, he says, the heart has its reason of which the mind knows nothing. Ignatius was truly a human being who was affectively experiencing God, not simply intellectually thinking. We can have a lot of understanding about God. We can think about God. We can understand. We study. We can do PhD. That's not important for Ignatius. Ignatius always believed that heart is important. That's why later on in his ministries he propagated on humanitarian subjects, etc. Because he considered every person who is created in this world by God has a purpose in life, and therefore we need to use our hearts, because only an affective experience can change person. Because Ignatius experienced that personally, his own life. Therefore, the spirituality developed places great emphasis on the affective life. Affective, as I said, affective life. Heart has to be touched. We know that a person will not change by simply merely knowing a thing. Person can change only the person accept as an experience, affective experience. And that is his another area of contribution. And therefore always contemplation, etc. he has given us, because our senses has to be used in our prayer life. And therefore Ignatius will say it's a spiritual renewal. Focus more on the heart than intellect. It is easy to know things, but it is difficult to experience things and transform things. Therefore, once you are touched your heart, or your heart is touched by God, then you will become very, very generous. You will simply submit yourself wholeheartedly to God. That's his experience, and I think that's a very, very tremendous experience in spiritual life. The fifth point is, he says, Ignatian spirituality emphasizes on inner freedom. We have always, there is a pull within, both external and internal. And he stresses on internal spirituality. Internal, our intentions, our desires, our interior movements. God is at work within. God's spirit is in us. That spirit will lead us to choose right or wrong. And therefore he says the spirit is indwelling within us. So that is a significant understanding of spirituality. It's not only externally doing so many things that makes a person better. Ignatian spirituality always look at your interior movements, and therefore he asks us to have an inward journey, a daily examination of person. Examine, we call, no? Examine. Socrates says, an unexamined life is not worth living. We need to look within, have an inward journey, and that only will make qualitatively better persons. And therefore Ignatius will say you should be aware of your interior movements. We need to have an interior freedom, whether it is a long life or a short life, whether it is rich or poor, whether it is a better place or a bad place, whether it is a long life or a short life. We need to see God's work. There should be an what do we call equanimity. There should be a peace within. There should be an indifference in that sense, not much of an attachment to one or the other. And therefore he says, it is very interesting to listen his words. He says, we should not fix our desires on health or sickness, wealth or poverty, success or failure, a long life or a short life. Our one goal is the freedom to make a wholehearted choice to follow God. I can say confidently that many of our Jesuit fathers who were born and brought up in another culture, another country, another continent, have simply moved out to another area which is totally unknown to them, and they were so interiorly free. Wherever they went, they considered that as their home, and they worked so committedly, so lovingly, so honestly, because they were interiorly free. The next important point of Ignatian spirituality is that Ignatian mindset is strongly inclined to reflection and self-scrutiny. The distinctive Ignatian prayer is a daily examen. I had made another talk on daily examen for children in my YouTube. So this daily examen is a review of our daily activities with an eye toward detecting and responding the presence of God. 3 challenging reflective questions lie at the heart of the spiritual exercises, which is a very, very famous book of St. Ignatius, Spiritual Exercises. The book Ignatius wrote to help others deepen their spiritual life. He says, what 3 questions he asks. The first one is, what have I done for Christ? And at present, what am I doing for Christ? And for the future, what will I do for Christ? So these 3 things Ignatius was always asking, and I think he is insisting all of us to ask these 3 questions every day and every moment of our life. What have I done for Christ? What am I doing for Christ? And what will I do for Christ? These 3 questions will simply transform, change the quality of our life. 7th point Ignatian spirituality says is it's a very, very practical spirituality, in the sense it says Ignatian spirituality is adaptable. It is not that one size fit for all. Ignatius spirituality says it's adaptable. It's an outlook, not a program. It is your attitude, a set of attitudes and insights he gives us. It is not simply a well-defined schemes. Ignatius' first advice the spiritual directors was to adapt the spirituality or spiritual exercises to the needs of the person entering the retreat. Today, we talk about multiple intelligence, traits of the persons, etc. 500 years ago, Ignatius said, each individual is different, they are unique, they have a unique giftedness. Therefore, anything we do, we must do according to the needs of that person. One size fit for all spirituality is not Ignatian spirituality. At the heart of Ignatian spirituality, therefore, is a profound humanism. a profound humanism. You read any of his writings, letters, his constitution, his spiritual exercises, diaries, you will find totally a humanistic way of looking at. And therefore Ignatian spirituality is totally a profoundly human or humanism. It respects people's lived experiences and honors the vast diversity of God's work in the world. The Latin phrase cura personalis is a very, very significant point for Ignatian spirituality. It means care of individual. Each individual must be cared for. And that is another. And how the total personality of the person, that is called total growth of the person, that is called cura personalis. And therefore, attention to people's individual needs and respect is the hallmark of Ignatian spirituality. The eighth point, according to St. Ignatius, we can derive from Ignatian spiritual exercises and his writings is that don't do it alone. For him, no one is a separate entity. Ignatius believes in teamwork with God, with others, and therefore it is a collaborative spirituality. Ignatian spirituality is a collaborative spirituality. Ignatian spirituality sees the link between God and man as a relationship, a bond of friendship that develops over time as a human relationship does. Collaboration is built in the very structure of spiritual exercises. That is why the previous general congregations of the society always talk about collaboration and networking, collaboration and teamwork with people who are working for the well-being and welfare of human beings. That's why Jesuits all over the world are very much known for networking and teamwork. So that is, I think it is today's context is very, very important, especially in the context of this pandemic, etc. We need to be working together, and working together works, they say. We need to work together with other people who are also working for the welfare of the human beings. The ninth point, which is very, very significant, and it is everybody must have heard this is called contemplation in action. For a Jesuit or for Jesuit collaborators in spirituality, Jesuit spirituality, it is not contemplation and action, prayer and work. No, prayer is work. Work is prayer. Therefore, God's Spirit is within us, getting in touch with Him, and we work sincerely. We work for God's greater glory, not one's own glory. Therefore, it says, those formed in the Ignatian spirituality are often called contemplatives in action. And remember, the 500 years ago, it was a radical thinking. They are reflective people with rich inner life who are deeply engaged in God's work in the world. They unite themselves with God by joining God's active labor, because we believe, as the Bible says, God is at work. My Father is at work. So am I, Jesus says. And we accept that God's work everywhere, in everything. And therefore, finding God in everything. It's like Eastern philosophy, Eastern thinking, Eastern spirituality. So finding God in everything. Therefore, not so narrow-minded, sectarian thinking. It is God is in operation even in the difficult times, even in these pandemics, even in this darkness. God is at work. And the final point is Ignatian spirituality. Today we can make it this way, that men and women for others. Human beings are for others. There is no separate entity. We cannot be independent. We need to be interdependent, interconnected. We must be people for others, others' well-being. We must be an extension of the other. That feeling has to come. And therefore, Ignatian spirituality, the great leader, Ignatian, the former general of the Society of Jesus, Pedro Arupe, he says this idea of this helping people, etc., etc., he brought into this term called helping men and women for others. We are here men and women for others. So that is the whole of Jesuits. So both these phrases express a deep commitment to social justice, a radical giving of oneself to others. The heart of this service is a radical generosity, and Ignatius asked for in his most famous prayer. I conclude with that Ignatius's famous prayer, that it says, Lord, teach me to be generous. Teach me to serve you as you deserve, to give and not to count the cost, to fight and not to heal the wounds, to toil and not to seek for rest, to labor and not to ask for reward, save that of knowing that I do your will. And this prayer, in fact, summarizes the entire spirituality, the 10 points which I explained to you. Ignatian spirituality is a very, very powerful tool for us to have a peaceful coexistence, a harmonious existence, and also building up a peaceful, harmonious human family. This 31st of July, as we celebrate the Ignatian feast, let us all be encouraged to follow this spirituality so that we may build up a world which is more humane and more divine, and it will be a space for all of us to thrive as God wants us to blossom. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and happy feast of Loyola to all of you. Thank you.